Hi, Monica. Nice to see you. Thank you very much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Tell me a little bit about how you got into homeopathy.
Um, so the big story is that when I was about 3, I started having recurring throat infections, and my mom had just moved into a suburb of Munich where there was pretty much nothing back then, except for like a train station with a train every hour. And she actually and the town she lived in had she had never lived in before. So she didn't really know much, but she was starting to read, and she was herself very interested in healthy living, and she read about homeopathy. So she found somewhere in town a homeopath where we trekked to somehow by train and bus. And I do remember kind of being asleep, like waiting in that waiting room. And she said, yeah, he gave you something, and just never came back.
Wow.
So unfortunately, that doctor was pretty far, so I don't think we ever went back to him. But I think that really sparked my interest. So when I was older, she found a homeopath closer, or actually we had a car by then, so we just drove there, which wasn't that close either. But and so I just got treated by homeopathy pretty much from age 10, I want to say. Now, this was Germany, so the doctor was also an MD and could have given me antibiotics. I don't think that particular doctor ever did. And so then when I got really older, like 16, 17, I found myself a homeopath in the little town that we lived in, and just started going to him by myself. And I was adamant about homeopathy, didn't really know much about it, though. It was kind of hard to find really literature, and he wasn't super forthcoming about, here, read this or read that, or go study this, So, but what did happen was that I had a kidney infection when I was about 18, and I've never been so sick in my life. And he came over with something. And so because that was like before computers, before anything, and he said, yeah, I read up on it, and there was this case of this woman who was in the ocean, and after this remedy helped. And because it had come on after a nice warm day, and then I went bathing in one of the many Bavarian lakes.
Okay.
And lo and behold, from this very painful experience, I fell asleep, woke up, was fine. And so that was great. So then I moved to Paris, and new city, new germ. I got really sick a few times, and after the third time, I was like, "This is enough. I need to go see a homeopath." And she, little by little, brought my health back up. It's just mostly like upper respiratory infections, but as I was studying singing, it wasn't really viable to have cold all the time. So she really brought me up to a level where I just didn't get sick all the time. And I also had a voice teacher who was very much into homeopathy. So I want to say, between my voice teacher and my homeopath, I got very much saved from a autoimmune issue that I had right after my son was born. Because my homeopath was on vacation, so my voice teacher just put together a little package. It was all polypharmacy.
Okay.
So I was not familiar with classical homeopathy. Well, that's not true, because my German homeopaths were pretty much classical. But like I experienced polypharmacy a lot when I was in France, or mostly. And then when I moved here to the United States, I was just appalled how there was no doctors that were homeopaths, and nobody knew about homeopathy. I mean, none of my singer colleagues were even closely familiar. I mean, not even Arnica. I mean, I gave Arnica to one of my colleagues in the opera at a rehearsal because she had some, whatever, her ankle was giving her trouble. And she came back to rehearsal 3 days later, and she said, "Oh, that really helped. Nothing was doing anything, and all of a sudden it just started, moving and kind of being able to move it again. And you're good at this. You should do this." I'm like, me? I can't be. That put a bug in my mind, and I started researching it.
Okay.
And so I realized I could actually be a homeopath in the United States without having to go through med school, which was a revelation. And so I started researching even more, and I found a school in my town.
Yes. Oh, fantastic.
In Los Angeles. Oh my God, a homeopathy school. And I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And so that at that time, I had another, how there's always like 2-3 people instrumental in that one thing. Another friend of mine started asking me for homeopathic advice. And I did bring a lot of remedies, and I brought a lot of books, but I never really thought of treating my family more than like a little, arnica.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I started looking in my books and giving her stuff. And she came back and said, it really worked. It was really good. So I went into school and discovered classical homeopathy, and been hooked ever since. Also, the homeopaths, I just had this discussion with a few colleagues that it made me to believe the homeopaths in France that there was really only up to 30C. That was like the highest.
Yes.
And then just found out there were homeopaths who did higher potencies in France, but not the ones I knew. So yes, the whole schooling was an absolute revelation. How it's how it comes from this philosophy, and it went through from Germany into America and now India. I mean, I'm still fascinated by the whole history.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just amazing. Obviously, you've traveled through different countries and seen how different it is in different countries, and how accepted it is in some and known in others. And of course, we're just learning all of the time. But I do think that the internet has really helped people who are interested in natural therapies get together and begin to learn more about homeopathy. So I do think it's beginning to grow. Tell me, what is it that you love about homeopathy?
Well, I just love that it is so elegant. Like the way of its action is just when you get the right remedy, and it can either get you out of your acute state so elegantly, like you fall asleep, or just calm down, even though the nose is still running. And if, well, most of the time, if it's an acute, then the fever will go down pretty fast. But you might still have this stuffy nose and this awful cough, but you just feel better. And little by little, the runny nose and the awful cough will just kind of diminish and disappear, or the fever will just disappear. A child will fall asleep. Or myself, I've noticed that whole kidney infection was a perfect example of a remedy working.
Yes.
My mom said, "Oh my God, she forgot to give me the remedy," and there I was asleep. So I was like, I better let her sleep. And so being a singer, I was really appalled how singers had no idea about homeopathy. I mean, even the ones that would be naturally minded,
Mm-hmm.
or a little more aware of, well, we're singers, we need to keep healthy. It's more about, eating right, taking the right supplements, or when you are sick, drinking your ginger tea or your lemon tea, and your honey, whatever is, the Monika honey is a big thing right now. So it's good for throat.
Okay.
I guess. I'm glad to say that with my homeopathic treatment, I have not been sick much lately.
Fantastic news.
Because, a new move, sure enough, I got sick again here a lot.
Yeah.
Not so much anymore. So, yeah, singers, at least in the old times, used to take a lot of things that were very dehydrating, like antihistamines or decongestant, and that was just very detrimental for the voice, because the voice does need that moisturizing in order to be able to do its thing, which is to connect and then vibrate and create this vibration. And if it's dried out, then it can become very painful, and we can also actually damage the vocal cords. So people have been a little bit more mindful about this. But again, they're not aware of the elegance of homeopathy. So I really decided to study homeopathy in order to bring homeopathy to the performance, people who use their voices, and to the performance world, because it is, really at this point unknown. So by now people know a little bit more, but I'm still working on it.
Perfect. And of course, that makes you more aware, of course, of lung diseases and asthma and things that actually affect lung health as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So I decided for starters to do a study on asthma, which runs it. I'm very interested, obviously, since my own experiences have been, we like to go by our own experience, have been autoimmune issues, upper respiratory issues, and digestive health.
Okay.
So I decided to start with lung health, asthma, because asthma is that's what I hear all the time. Allergies and asthma is what I hear most of the time from my singer colleagues.
Yes.
And so I decided to do a study on that and see, so I can really then say, I've examined the asthma issue.
That's right.
And I can really come to the table with a lot of experience on that.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so what we'll do is put some information about the study below, and you can find more about Monika and what she does helping people with asthma and lung susceptibilities. Thank you very much for joining us, Monika.
Thank you so much, Mary, for having me. This was a pleasure, and I'll talk to you soon.